With this slide, I provide you a timeline of ancient Greece broken down by the various ages. We will go over each of them. You will still need to read the book, but I will point out the highlights for note-taking purposes. The Paleolithic age we know almost nothing about. When we talk about this period, we're talking about 7,000 years ago and more. We don't even know exactly who lived there during that period, although we are aware that Greece was inhabited by modern-day humans. The image you see here was found in a cave during this period. For the Neolithic age, we know just a bit more through the remnants of stone tools, pottery, graves, and houses. We know almost nothing about their culture or language. The early Middle Bronze Age was the age of the Minoans on the island of Crete. On Crete, we know that they had bulls and that the bulls were often sacrificed. There was evidence of a fertility goddess. We know of the double axe to sacrifice bulls. That's where the word labyrinth comes from. Think labyrinth. We know culturally and linguistically they belong to a group called Indo-Europeans. The language is called Proto-Indo-European writing, or Linear A. To this day, we have been unable to decipher Linear A writing. For the Late Bronze Age, we must note that the Mycenaeans came in and destroyed the Minoans of Crete around 1450 BCE. There is evidence through ruins, written documents, and tombs. Many of the Greek legends we will cover come from this period. Think hero stories. Here you see the great Mycenaean gate, and you also see the gold mask of Agamemnon. This period came to an end when the Dorians, sons of Heracles, overtook the Mycenaeans in 1150 BCE. Fire destroyed the palaces, and Greece sank into the Dark Ages for about 400 years. Before we cover the Dark Age, let me say something about Linear B. There were a number of tablets discovered that we knew were the same language, but we did not know how to read them. In 1952, Michael Ventris finally deciphered Linear B. It is the non-alphabetic script of Mycenaeans. You should note that they had clay tablets with some 80 signs. These tablets acted more like accounting sheets that showed what and how much was given, paid in taxes, or traded. It is not a language as we have come to know it. The Dark Age was a time, about 400 years, when the ancient Greeks slipped back a bit, much like the Dark Ages in Europe. During this period, refugees migrated from Greece to Asia Minor. There were different groups like the Ioans and the Aeolians. It was a time of poverty, scattering, and social disorganization. The Archaic period is important for many reasons. At the beginning of this period, about 800 BCE, the Greek alphabet was developed, what we're used to, standard sounds associated with letters. And there's lots to cover during the Archaic period. The Greek concept of polis developed. That was the idea of political independent city-states. It inspired the concept of citizenship for men. There was the rebirth of commerce and seafaring. And in the 6th century BCE, that's the 500s, coinage or a money system was developed. There was conflict between the kakoi and the aristoi, the working class kakoi versus the aristocracy aristoi. Note that the aristoi still held power in cultural matters because they were literate and educated. Long poems of Homer and Hesiod were composed. They contain and affirm society's values. Homer is an 8th century BCE oral poet. That's during the 700s. He came up with the Iliad and the Odyssey, long epic poems. These poems never mention writing, but they include details of earlier ages. Hesiod is an 8th century oral poet. He was a shepherd of Mount Helicon, and he claimed he was inspired by the Muses to compose poetry and wisdom literature. He composed Theogony, a book dealing with the origin of gods, and Works and Days, a book of wisdom literature about the nature of right and wrong. During this period, myths were finally put into writing. Most of our knowledge about the ancient Greeks come from this period. They created pottery with stories pictured on them, pots and various types of vases, and about 50,000 of them survive to today. It is estimated that that is only 1% of all of them that they ever created. Imagine that they estimate that there were over 5 million pieces of pottery from this time period that didn't survive. Threats from abroad are what brought this period to an end. The classical period begins with threats from abroad. Persians from modern-day Iran and Iraq, under Cyrus the Great. They overtook Greece. They chose to absorb Greek culture rather than destroying it.